Hey, good morning, um, everyone from the Asia Pacific time zone. First of all, Happy New Year. Hope you all had a great rest and ready for another year ahead of us. Um, Let me start the webinar. Thank you for making the time this morning. For those of you who doesn't know me, my name is Pat. I'll be the host, the presenter for today's presentation. I have been with Imperium for over 6 years, and I've been working with many enterprises and organizations in the Asia Pacific region to protect, secure their mobile devices, as well as the mobile application that they build and construct these days. So topic today is actually going to be quite interesting and exciting. We're going to talk about some of the attack pattern examples across the banking sectors of the Asia Pacific. I know today, we've got some attendee from the region. We're actually going to have another specific section or topic covering Australia and New Zealand in about a few weeks' time, right? But today we generally will be covering some of the observations and interesting cases that we have observed. Okay, without further ado, so we will cover today two different areas of mobile security threat pattern. The first one will be around devices, endpoints, right? So the devices that we use day in, day out for personal as well as for work. And obviously, with those devices that are so powerful today, they have many different risk factors that can impact their ability to operate, as well as the impact to the organization, who allows mobile devices to communicate and in a fashion of working. So let's start with the device, and then we'll move on to the application risk. On the device side, we can see there are generally 4 different attack vectors that mobile devices can be compromised or the risk can arise. So it's broken down into device, network, phishing, and applications. As Imperium, we protect over 60 million mobile devices globally. And this kind of devices data set give us the ability to really understand and look at insight and trends around the attack vector, how they have been evolving over time. As you can see here, over the last 12 months, we have seen an increase in zero-day exploit that vulnerability that has been discovered on the mobile operating system platform, right? And that 466% sounds very high. It actually represents 1 in 3 0-day that that is critical as an important severity. They're actually targeting at mobile devices. I guess no surprises, right? It is our new platform of computing platform of choice. Network, we've actually observed 1 in 5 devices that are protected by our solution are using or experience some form of network manipulation attack, right? So this includes fake network, rogue Wi-Fi, or more concerning attacks such as man-in-the-middle certificate injection. Phishing, it's another area that I don't think needs introduction. It becomes a really new target for mobile users today, and we also have some interesting data and chain of attack that actually originated from phishing. Lastly, about application. So we all know today there are lots of applications that we have on our phone. While we use for personal, those apps can actually potentially have access to data such as enabling microphone, whatever the data you've taken, pictures you've taken in the camera album. Even some of the applications have access to copy and paste buffers within your phone, right? And we know we do this a lot as we use the devices, and a lot of the sensitive data can be leaked without a lot of the user aware of. Okay, so these are the summary of some of the risk, but let's get into some of the more detailed threat mapping and landscape, right? So first of all, I wanted to share, closer to me, the region that I stay in Singapore, and the map here represents the different dots, represents the different type of threats within this region across the 2022 timeframe, right? So these are devices that is running our protection software and anonymously reporting threat intelligence to our customer base. So you actually can get a good insight around, the green color. You can see more dominant, right, on the map, represent a lot of the man in the middle network related attack, right? Again, this is something quite simple, simple to activate. And the best part of this attack is that doesn't require user to do anything. You just use your phone as it is. The attacker is able to set up a fake network, potentially spoof a Wi-Fi, or they can jump on the same network that you are operating on, maybe a public Wi-Fi in the public area, and then essentially perform the next step of attack. What's interesting on this data is that we are seeing increasing of malicious website, right? So those phishing links coming along quite rapidly, as well as there's a increasing number of malware that's being distributed through a third-party app store. So not from the official Google and Apple store, but coming from stores that are not really have the good security protection to really trigger scams and things that will impact the financial organization. Moving on, so I've got another map, not too far away from us as well, from Malaysia. So similar kind of picture tells similar story, right? And by the way, both in Singapore and Malaysia, we have quite a lot of government, banking, finance users, protected by our solution. And these are the sort of data set we are seeing is quite consistent, right? So you can see orange dot represent malicious and phishing sites. So that number is increasing as part of the color indicates. We see more rogue access points. So these are network devices that people have set up, right, intentionally to spoof network and attract users' connection, right? So that's all the ones for the devices across the region. What I wanted to sort of move on is, device risk is one thing that concerns enterprises and financial organizations today, more from the internal protection, right? But now the other big attack vectors that we are seeing across the region is actually the mobile application that these financial institutions build, develop to really help improve the engagement and experience of users. These application risks are now becoming a headache for many organizations. With the regulations in Singapore, Malaysia, even recently in the Philippines and Indonesia, most of the banking customers are now seeing the attack of actually coming from the outside to the application, and through the application, not only fraud can take place, but also the mobile devices and the app can then be used as a pivot into the enterprise, right? Because these days your user will log in with a credential, the app on the mobile phone will talk to a server on the back end. Isn't that much more convenient rather than trying to attack the bank directly, right? So generally from the app perspective, right, remember we have, for the device perspective, we have device network applications and phishing vector. From the app security perspective, there are actually three areas of where the risks are introduced within this life cycle, right? Because as we develop application, developers are generally not a security expert, right? And at the same time, I'm sure many of the security attendees on the call today, the security architects are actually not developer who writes code, right? So during development, there is this gap where we need to be able to apply these compliances and protect data and application to the best of our ability. At the same time, the developer might not always know what are the best solution to address those risks, right? So what often happens in our experience is that minimum securities or security are being implemented in the life cycle, and some issues are found during pen testing towards the end of the life cycle, and sometimes even after production. So that's one area of risk that can potentially happen. Then we move on to once you publish the app, right? So the other challenge we hear from a lot of the customers today is that the customer do not have visibility on who is downloading their app and how their app are being, potentially, compromised or attacked in the wild, because everything that the development team and the security team have done so far is that I pen tested the app. I put in best practices, security certificate pinning, encryption of the data at rest, in transit, etc. But once it's released, right? Really, you're hoping for the best. So that's another areas of risk where a lot of the reverse engineering people are now taking advantage of these applications, stealing sensitive information like API keys within the application that are actually quite valuable for the attackers. And then once the application gets installed onto the end user device, right? Now, how would you differentiate a hacker downloading your application on their device, which is already compromised, versus a legitimate user that's using your application, right? So that's another area of risk and lack of visibility today, right? They could be running the devices on rooted and jailbroken device. And in fact, many customers that we're working with today tells us that, hey, we have implemented root and jailbreak detection, yet again, they are still being bypassed. And often, right, this comes back to the fundamental of how the security is applied, right? A lot of these are signature-based, detection that is embedded in the app. And as any security professional would tell you, signature is really not going to help you in today's ever-changing landscape. More on these examples later. Now, on the you just coincide with the financial institution, right? So not only you have these, during development, publishing the app, and also when the users are using your app, the fraud channel or fraud transactions are coming from mobile devices and mobile browsers, right? Mobile applications and browsers. 70% of the transaction, fraudulent transaction, actually, in a research published by RSA for the first half of 2022, devices are 70% frauds come from mobile. And this is the kind of interesting breakdown. There's a lot of brand abuse, right? People can take a bank logo from their website very easily. Even easier, they can take the application that the bank have published, pull out all the relevant information, logo, fonts, even the page, and then they can clone the application and make a fake application, right? And trick the user to use that application to provide transaction. So that's one, very common way that's very difficult for enterprises today, financial institution today to protect, right? Obviously, phishing is always there, regardless whether I'm targeting a user or targeting a financial institution's customer, right? We keep seeing cases of these going around. And the other interesting example is these Trojans and malware that are specifically designed, right, to attack the application, right? And I've got some example to share with you to make it much more interesting. So, as we mentioned earlier, application risk is big in the region. That's concerned by many of the organization and the banks, because simply the attacker can do either online attack and offline attack. Even without running your application, they can extract a binary, and with the binary, they can actually do a lot of things already, right? And 40% of the application that we scanned doesn't actually have an effective obfuscation technique applied to those applications, meaning that people can very easily drag and drop your application and then can see essentially a decomposed source code of your application, right? Something that a lot of the security professional are probably aware of, or maybe even not aware of the ease of this type of risk. And offline attack, it's something that you won't even have the ability to understand whether it's happening or not, right? Because it can all happen on the computer without connectivity to any environment. Then the attacker can move on to online, launch the application, instrument the application, and then put breakpoints in locations where sensitive information are being performed, right? Encryption of data, decryption of data, certain sensitive transaction, maybe even inject fake transactions, right? So that's how these attack vectors are occurring on the mobile application front. And some of the technique I've mentioned earlier, right? So they are emergent technique, because when we talk to many of the banks today, they actually tell us that, hey, we've done the best we could, right? As per best practices from OWASP, we've hardened the application, so they apply some obfuscation, they encrypt the data, they obfuscated the code, right? So essentially, why is it still not enough? Because I'm still getting attacked and there's still fraud, right? So the reality is really this concept of outside in attack, right? So if you imagine the application that you build is a vault, it's a very secure room that you are providing, and you give it to the user. The user install this vault, or put this vault into their house, which is essentially the mobile phone they are using. While you have a very secure room in the house, if the house is already compromised, if the bad guy is already inside the house, then it doesn't really matter how secure your room is constructed. It's just a matter of time the attacker can get in, right? And the attackers are using innovative ways like malwares, right? Trojans. They are, exploiting the vulnerability of the operating system, essentially breaking into the house, then breaking into the applications. Okay, so let me show you a real example here of such malware, right? So we probably all heard about the overlay attack, the banking Trojan, right? But a lot of the people cannot really visualize how does it work, right? So now have a look at the video here. But before I play the video, essentially these malware, there's two steps of for the malware to work. First step is the malware needs to be installed onto a victim's device. However way, either through phishing, through disguise themselves as a other legitimate app, right? But the goal of these malwares are getting special permissions on your device, right? And this technique, overlay technique, is specifically for Android operating system, right? It tricks the user to accept these permissions, and then once the malware is installed, it will then monitor the application, right? So if you look at this video here, I have a device that has the malware has not been installed, okay, or activated. I'm launching a banking application here as I'm going through the workflow, right? I'm logging in to the application, and you can see here, user can provide credentials, password, right? And then this is a bogus, testing, so you'll come back with the invalid credential, right? So now what we're going to do is on the same device, we're going to now activate and install the malware. And you can see here, right? This malware is intelligent enough to know that this device is running a different languages, right? So it's showing you the localized language. Now, these are the really important part, right? The malware trick the user to accept these permissions that allows a fake screen to be overlaid on top of the real application, okay? So now if you see here, the user's now gonna launch the same app again, okay? But this time, rather than the real application show up, do you notice here, the login screen looks a little bit different to the original one, right? Because this is actually the malware acting and putting a fake screen on top. And now the malware not only have the ability to capture the username password, it also has the ability to read the OTP SMSs, right? Which then allow the attacker to do many things, setting up new account transfer, even transfer fund. Because on the same device, right, all that information is being exposed, and that's the way a lot of the users operate today. We have seen this same amount of technique being applied across Asia Pacific region. In fact, I was talking to a banking user of ours, and they were facing similar, they observe similar challenges, right? So whatever you're doing today with your mobile security, the new technique and new solutions, new ways of working around it are out there, right? So you really need to have a way to relook how you're protecting yourself. The next example, right, is probably more common, right? Probably much lower technically, as in terms of the have to develop a malware, trick the user to download it and do all that work, right? Obviously, the value for that type of attack is much higher, but we have seen fake application that tries to mimic certain banking organization, right? Really to damage the reputation, and a lot of the time, if you look at it from the organization financial banking perspective, right? If someone tries to create a fake version of the bank, and if the user was tricked to download the bank and start trusting that it's the bank, then whose fault is it, right? It's very difficult to really get across the message because the user's at fault, right? They didn't pay attention, but was there anything that the bank can do, right, to prevent this type of thing, right? So I think it's a very topical thing these days. Now, moving on to the other hand, right, you can see the phishing messages. We got plenty of those every day. And, not only they are used for harvesting the credentials, right? They can also be used to deliver malwares that you saw earlier on that video. Okay. So again, something, not a traditional security or application security solution can help you address, right? It really, expanding the context and the risk, and it needs a different, sort of mindset to secure the applications and the user's experience. Now, just before we finish off the session, I want to give two real examples that we have actually observed, right? And this is where the idea of the threat chaining comes in, right? So it's important to note, right, that none of the single attack will be successful by just doing one thing, right? As you know, security and everything that an attacker does is to take many different little baby steps to slowly get into and closer to the core of where they want to go to, right? So this is an example from Android, right? And this is similar to the second case I shared about phishing, right? So we actually found Android 11 devices on the user within the Southeast Asia region, right? They receive a SMS, and they tap the link. They're actually being sent or directed to a malicious website, right? And these are events that's generated and triggered by the solutions, right? And we can see the TLS communication has been downgraded. And all this happened, you can see within a minute, right? And then the malicious website actually pushed down a malicious APK that does the overlay or the banking Trojan type of attack, right? So now you can see and visualize how some of these attacks can actually being delivered to the user. And this is only the first half, right? Because by getting the APK onto the device, the attacker have done, sort of half of the job. They will then require the user to launch it, and then the app will then sit there and wait, right, and harvest information, right? So it's important from a comprehensive mobile security perspective to have the ability to detect this type of event for your employee, right? So on the user's device, and as well as the ability to do something also on the application. Now, the next example on the iOS front, we're going to see and show you an example how an iOS device, right, fairly new model. So this is probably earlier in the year, last year, right? At the time, 15.4 was the latest version, or not too far from the latest version, right? A user was connected through a unsecure Wi-Fi network, and through the rogue access point, which is a fake Wi-Fi that someone has set up, the device was exploited due to the vulnerability in the OS. The operating system has been tampered, right? So these are, again, indicators that we have triggered. And the last thing we noticed is that not only the attacker was able to get, privileged access onto the device, they then move on and attack the application, right? So the application tampering then trigger, right? So here you can just imagine that house example, that picture that I gave you, the attacker broke into the house, and now they are now sitting outside the room, the vault, with the door open, and they're now instrumenting and looking inside what you are doing, right? And trying to extract valuable information to attack the application on that device. Okay, so those are the I think example that happened to customers that has a tremendous impact, right? To whether you're a financial organization or enterprises that have businesses and information to protect. Okay, so I think that was all the information that I wanted to share with you. There is a bit of a few things that I would suggest and recommend and encourage the attendees to reach out to us. Obviously, I've covered a lot of topic, both on the device side and the application side, right? Really, I think the goal for this year is really to look at your project, your organization, understand if you understand the risk of these devices and apps, right? These assets that you have and the usage and how you're going about securing them, right? Because the device management solution is really not the only answers, right? Because there's a lot of BYOD usage today. Looking at how you can protect some of the advanced phishing and really protecting mobile as an endpoint. The last thing, which is where we spend quite a bit of time talking about the application protection, right, is really to have the ability to instrument your application so that when it goes live into the wild, you are getting security telemetries back to say, hey, this user on this particular device app version attacking the user, etc. So kind of like the Dynatrace and App Dynamic visibility, right? Rather than user experience, you're looking at transaction security telemetry. Okay, so those are the things I will recommend. I think we have some questions. Let me close off the Q&A here before we wrap up the summary. So, have you increased post-COVID working from home? Okay, that's a great question. So the question here is, has the attack vector increased post-COVID working from home? Right. So we have actually data goes all the way back to 2019 when we first started the global threat reports. Right. So we have definitely seen a huge increase of phishing attack during COVID, right? But when we talk about post-COVID, we are kind of in this hybrid working mode, right? We are consistently seeing, increasing of the malware attack, for example, consistently seeing the network-related issue, because regardless whether you're working from home or you're commuting to work, right? Those connectivity network-related risks are always there, right? But one thing I would want to emphasize just on that question is, while we spend a lot of time working from home, one thing that often comes to my mind is that while we're leveraging the home network, the Wi-Fi access point that's provided by the telco provider, when was the last time you updated the software or the firmware on your home router, right? Because we don't have the same luxury as on the enterprise. Within the office, you have all the enterprise-grade software, firewall, etc., right? We know or have better visibility and control. But if you look at your home Wi-Fi network, how many devices are connected to your home Wi-Fi? Do you even know, right? Are your Wi-Fi patched up to the latest security vulnerability? Because you do everything on your home network, right? Streaming, working, and everything. So really, I think the important message here is to really have enough adequate protection and visibility so that you actually know where the risks are coming from and manage that proactively. Okay. Let's see if there's any other question from the attendees. Okay, if there's no question, that's actually all the presentation or all the information that I want to share. I would really thank you for attending the session. Hopefully it was insightful and share something new to you. And please do reach out to us, to the team, the Zimperian team. We're more than happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you, understanding your requirement better, and share how we are protecting other financial institutions and enterprises in the region, right? And the last thing before I forget, the upcoming Chinese New Year, wish everybody who celebrates and have a prosperous and happy New Year, 新年快乐. Okay, thank you very much.